The mountains slept under a white shroud that night. Wind howled through the pines like lost souls, carrying flakes that danced against the walls of a lonely wooden cabin. Inside sat Eli Turner, a rugged mountain man with a thick beard and cold blue eyes, sharpening his hunting knife beside a dim fire. His coat was made of rough fur, his face carved by winters of silence and regret. He hadn't heard another voice in months, until that night. A faint knock echoed through the storm. Eli froze. His hand stopped mid-air. Another knock, weak, desperate. He stood, grabbed his lantern and moved to the door. Eli shut the cabin door as the wind screamed outside. The woman shivered near the fire, her wet clothes steaming in the heat. Her eyes were hollow, like someone who'd already buried hope. Eli poured warm water into a tin cup and handed it to her, his rough voice breaking the silence. "Drink this, ma'am. You'll freeze if you don't." Her trembling hands barely held the cup. "My name's Martha," she whispered. "We lived by the river bend. Before the fire." Eli nodded quietly. He didn't ask more. Some pain didn't need questions. He knelt beside the small bundle, the child wrapped in a worn blanket. He pulled the edge gently, revealing a peaceful face, pale as snow. Eli's jaw clenched. He remembered another small grave long ago, his wife, and the child she never got to hold. The firelight flickered across his weathered face. He took a deep breath, whispering under his breath, "I'll bury him at dawn. The ground's hard, but I'll manage." Martha looked up, tears filling her eyes again. You'd do that for me?" Eli simply nodded, turning back to the fire. The snowstorm outside howled like it wanted to swallow the world. Inside that small cabin, grief and kindness sat side by side, and neither of them spoke again for a long while. Morning came slow and grey. The storm had left the world buried in white silence. Eli stepped outside, a shovel slung over his shoulder, breath rising like smoke in the cold air. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. Martha stood there, clutching the blanket-wrapped body of her child. Neither spoke. Words had no place here. Eli found a small patch by an old pine tree, where the snowdrift wasn't too deep. He began to dig, the sound of metal against frozen earth, echoing in the still mountain air. Each strike was heavy, each breath slower than the last. His hands burned from the cold, but he didn't stop. Martha knelt beside the grave, whispering broken prayers. Her tears froze before they touched the snow. Eli finally lowered the small bundle into the shallow earth, covering it gently, pressing the last handful of snow like a promise. When it was done, Martha's trembling voice broke the silence. "Thank you. No one else would have done it." Eli didn't look up. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the small mound. "Ma'am, no one should have to bury their own child." The wind sighed through the pines. For a moment the world stood still. Two souls alone in the mountains, bound by sorrow deeper than the snow. The day faded fast behind the mountains, leaving only the dull glow of twilight across the snow. Eli and Martha walked back to the cabin without a word. The trail was quiet, the world frozen still, only the crunch of their boots breaking the silence. Inside, the fire had dimmed to a soft orange glow. Eli added a few logs, the crackle echoing in the small room. Martha sat in the same place as last night, eyes fixed on the flames, her hands still trembling slightly. Eli poured her a bit of stew from the pot he'd left simmering. She hesitated, then whispered, "I can't repay you for what you did." Eli didn't answer right away. He sat opposite her, staring into the fire as if it could swallow his thoughts. "Don't need payment," he said quietly. "Just don't vanish into the cold again." Her eyes lifted toward him, soft but tired. "You think I have anywhere to go?" she asked, almost smiling through her pain. Eli looked at her for a long moment. The firelight made her face glow faintly, fragile but alive. "Then stay here," he said finally, "till the thaw comes. No one should be alone up here." She looked away, tears forming again. Not from grief this time, but from a strange mix of gratitude and fear. She whispered, "God bless you, Mr. Turner." Eli nodded once, turning back to the fire. Outside, the storm had quieted, but something unseen was still brewing in the silence. Night fell heavy over the mountains. The fire inside the cabin burned low, its glow flickering weakly against the log walls. Martha had finally drifted into a shallow sleep near the hearth, her head resting against the chair. Eli sat by the window, pipe in hand, staring out into the darkness. The world outside was dead silent, no wolves, no wind, not even the whisper of snow. Just stillness. And then he heard it. A faint cry, Far off, like a woman's voice carried through the trees. Eli froze. It wasn't Martha, she was asleep. The sound came again, softer this time, almost pleading. He reached for his rifle, opened the door slowly. The night air bit hard against his face. The snow glittered under the half-moon, untouched except for a faint trail leading toward the woods. "Who's out there?" he called, his voice echoing through the cold. Silence. Then from somewhere deep between the trees, a whisper. "Eli." He gripped the rifle tighter, heart pounding. It couldn't be. That voice. It sounded like his wife's, the one he'd buried years ago. Behind him, Martha stirred awake. "Mr. Turner? What's wrong?" Eli didn't answer. He took one slow step into the snow, eyes fixed on the dark tree line. The cold wind rose again, swirling the snow like ghosts in the moonlight. Something unseen moved in the distance, just enough to draw him farther from the cabin. And then, the voice called again. Softer, closer. "Eli." He lowered his lantern, its light flickering weakly in the storm. Inside the cabin, Martha stood in the doorway, fear on her face. "Don't go out there," she whispered. But Eli was already gone into the night. The door creaked, the light of the fire faded, and the mountains swallowed the sound of his footsteps. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the frozen peaks, brushing the mountains in pale silver light. Inside the small wooden cabin, Martha stirred awake. The fire had burned out completely, leaving only blackened embers and cold ash. Her body trembled beneath the thin blanket. She rubbed her hands together, calling softly, "Mr. Turner?" No reply. Only the faint groan of the cabin walls under the weight of snow. She sat up, her heart already uneasy. The chair by the window empty, his pipe still resting on the table, a trail of ash frozen mid-fall. His coat hung on the wall untouched. The door stood slightly open. Snow had blown in during the night, forming a small drift near her feet. She walked toward it slowly, every step echoing in the silent room. When she stepped outside, the cold stabbed through her thin dress like needles. The world was painted white and still, the only sound, her shallow breath and the crunch of snow under her feet. Then she saw them. Footprints, deep, uneven tracks leading away from the cabin pot into the dark forest beyond. Her pulse quickened. "Mr. Turner," she called, her voice trembling. No answer. The footprints stopped halfway down the slope, like he had vanished into thin air. Her eyes darted from tree to tree, searching desperately. That's when she saw it. A rifle half buried in the snow. His rifle. Martha fell to her knees, brushing the frost from the wooden stock. The metal was still warm to the touch. And then, from somewhere deep within the trees, came a whisper. Soft, barely human. "Martha." Her eyes widened. She turned sharply, no one there. Only the endless snow and the sound of her own heartbeat. She clutched the rifle close and backed toward the cabin, whispering, "God help me." Martha pushed the cabin door shut, her hands shaking. The sound of the latch falling into place echoed louder than it should have. She leaned her back against the door, breathing fast, her mind spinning. The rifle still in her hands felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of a secret. She looked around the dim cabin and the walls creaked, and the wind moaned softly through the gaps. Shadows danced over the walls, moving like restless spirits. She whispered to herself, "He's gone. He's gone out there." But deep inside, she wasn't sure if Turner was even alive. The whisper came again, this time inside. "Martha." Her heart stopped. The voice was behind her. Inside the cabin, she turned slowly, every bone in her body stiff with terror. Nothing, just the rocking, chair moving slightly, back and forth. "Creak, creak." "No," she gasped, clutching the rifle tight. "No one's here." Her eyes darted to the corner. There on the floor, a trail of melted snow. Someone had stepped inside. The prints stopped near the chair. Martha's voice broke as she whispered, "Mr. Turner?" The chair suddenly stopped. Silence. Then from beneath the floorboards, a faint thud, like a hand hitting wood, once, twice. Thump, thump. She stumbled backward, her back hitting the table, a candle toppling to the floor. Wax spilled, and the tiny flame flickered, struggling to stay alive. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered a prayer. "Lord, protect my child's soul." The thumping grew louder. The boards trembled. Then came one final sound, a muffled voice, weak, desperate. "Help. Me." The candlelight flickered weakly, painting trembling shapes across the walls. Martha knelt down. her fingers hovering over the rough floorboards where the sound had come from. The voice was faint now, more like a dying breath than a call for help. Help me. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it might wake the dead. She pressed her ear to the wooden floor. The chill bit into her skin, and then she heard it again, a weak cough, and the sound of dragging. She gasped, "Turner!" Frantically, she grabbed the iron poker from the hearth and began prying the boards loose. Each plank screamed as the nails tore free. Dust and cold air burst up from the darkness below. A lantern hung above her, its weak flame trembling. She lowered it into the opening and froze. There, in the crawl space beneath the cabin, a man lay half buried under snow and mud. His face was pale, lips blue, eyes half open. It was Turner, alive, but barely. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. Martha dropped the rifle and reached down, her trembling hands brushing his frozen arm. "Hold on, just hold on!" She pulled, but his weight was too much. She cried out, her voice echoing through the cabin. "Please, don't die, not now." Turner's lips moved. His voice was dry and broken. "The child, where is he?" Her breath caught. She froze. How do you know about my child?" He tried to speak again, but his eyes rolled back. Martha's tears fell onto the dusty floor. "No, stay with me, Turner." But the only sound left was the wind outside, and the slow, rhythmic creaking of that empty rocking chair. Martha sat beside the open floorboards, her hands numb from cold and fear. Turner lay on a blanket now, the weak lantern light casting long shadows over his face. His breath was shallow, his skin pale as the moonlight spilling through the window. She poured a bit of warm water on his lips. "Please don't talk. Just rest." But Turner's cracked voice broke the silence. I can't rest. I came here for you." Martha froze. "For me?" He nodded weakly. "2 nights ago, a man came to my cabin," he said. "A widow lived near the ridge, buried her child, alone in the snow." Tears filled her eyes. "Who told you that?" Turner swallowed hard. "He said the boy wasn't meant to die. Said the mountain took what it wanted." Martha's hands trembled. "That's a lie. My boy died in my arms." Turner looked straight into her eyes, and for a moment, his gaze was not of pity but of knowing. "He said the grave isn't empty, Martha." Her heart stopped. The room seemed to fade. What do you mean?" Turner's head fell back, his eyes half closed. "Under the ridge, near the frozen stream. Something's moving beneath the snow." The word sent a chill through her bones. She pressed a hand to her mouth, shaking her head. "No, it can't be." Turner coughed, his voice fading. "He wanted me to dig, but when I found the child's cross, I couldn't." Martha's tears spilled freely now. "Who was he, Turner? Who sent you?" But Turner's eyes rolled back. His body went still, breath fading into silence. Only the wind remained, howling through the cracks like the cry of a lost soul. Martha stared at him for a long moment, whispering through her tears, "If my boy isn't where I left him, then where is he?" Outside, the storm began to rise again. The fire crackled softly inside the lonely mountain cabin. The poor widow sat on a wooden chair, her hands trembling as she held her child's small torn blanket. The mountain man watched her silently, his rugged face half lit by the flames. For a long time neither spoke. Only the wind outside howled through the cracks of the old wooden walls. Finally, the man got up and poured her a bowl of hot stew. "Eat," he said quietly. She hesitated, staring into the bowl, before whispering, "I have nothing left to give, not even a tear." The man's eyes softened. "Then let the mountain give back what it took," he murmured, sitting across from her. The widow looked at him in confusion, but his gaze was calm, almost sorrowful. He pulled a small wooden cross from his coat pocket, weathered and carved by hand. "This belonged to my son," he said. "He died on this mountain just like yours." The widow gasped, covering her mouth. The man looked down, his voice heavy with memory. "Maybe God sent you here, so neither of them would be buried alone." As snow drifted against the cabin window, the fire glowed brighter. 2 broken souls bound by the same grief, sitting together for the first time in years. The night deepened around the mountain cabin and silence filled the air. The poor widow sat near the dying fire, her face pale in the flickering glow. She had stopped crying. Her eyes now stared blankly at the flames, as if her tears had frozen inside her. The mountain man sat across from her, sharpening his old knife slowly, lost in thought. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "No one climbs this mountain and leaves the same," he said quietly. The snow buries more than bones. It buries memories. The widow looked up at him, startled. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. He didn't answer immediately. He stared into the fire, his jaw tight. "I buried my wife and son here. Years ago. Same place you found me." The words hung heavy in the cabin. The woman covered her mouth in shock. She could see the same pain she carried reflected in his tired eyes. The storm outside howled louder, as if the mountain itself remembered their grief. The widow stared at the man, her lips trembling. "You buried them here," she whispered. The mountain man nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "Winter came early that year. My wife was sick, my boy had fever. I tried to get them down the trail, but the snow trapped us halfway." His voice broke. "I dug with my bare hands. The ground was hard as stone. I buried them where the sun hits first every morning." Tears welled in the widow's eyes again. She looked toward the window, where the wind howled against the glass. "And you stayed here all these years?" He nodded. "Someone had to remember." The fire popped. She turned back to him, her voice barely a whisper. "Then maybe God sent me here, not to bury my child, but to remind you you're not alone." For the first time, the mountain man looked up. In the widow's trembling eyes, he saw the same pain, the same loss, and something else he hadn't seen in years, compassion. Hours passed. The storm outside began to fade, but inside the cabin the fire burned low and steady. The widow had stopped shaking. Her breathing was calm now. The mountain man stood and placed another log in the fire. He turned to her and said quietly, "Tomorrow, I'll take you to the ridge where the sun rises. We'll bury your child beside mine. They won't be alone anymore." The widow froze, her lips trembling as tears silently rolled down her cheeks. "You do that for me," she whispered. The man nodded once, his jaw tight. No mother should dig a grave alone. She lowered her head, clutching the little blanket to her chest. For the first time since her child's death, she closed her eyes, not from sorrow but from peace. Outside, dawn was beginning to break. The mountain peaks glowed faintly beneath the fading storm clouds. A new day was coming, one that carried both memory and mercy. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds. The storm had passed, leaving a thick blanket of snow over the mountain. The world was silent, only the crunch of their footsteps echoed as the mountain man and the widow began their slow climb up the ridge. The man carried a wooden shovel on his shoulder. The widow held her child wrapped gently in the torn blanket. The cold wind whispered through the pine trees, and every step felt heavier than the last. When they reached the ridge, the view stretched endlessly, peaks shining under the golden morning sun. The man stopped beside two small wooden crosses, one older, weathered by years of snow. "This is where my boy rests," he said softly. "He'll keep yours company now." The widow's knees gave way and she knelt beside the grave. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she placed her child down gently, covering him with snow herself. The man stood beside her, hat in hand, eyes closed. For a long moment, they both stayed silent. Two strangers united by grief, yet healed by understanding. After the burial, the widow sat quietly on the ridge, her hands resting on the snow where her child now slept. The mountain man stood beside her, his face turned toward the sunrise. The golden light painted the peaks, and for the first time in years, the mountain looked alive, not cold, not cruel, but full of memory. The widow spoke softly, her voice breaking the stillness. "You were right. The mountain doesn't only take, it gives back too." The man looked down at her, his eyes tired but calm. "Maybe it gives peace to those who deserve it." She smiled faintly, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Then maybe both of us found it today." The man nodded. He reached out a rough, trembling hand, helping her to her feet. Together they walked down the snowy slope, two broken souls who had finally found strength in each other's sorrow. As they disappeared into the trees, the morning sun rose higher over the graves, two small crosses standing side by side, glowing softly in the light. The wind whispered one last time across the ridge, carrying away the sound of pain and leaving behind the quiet peace of forgiveness.